So I'm a Yankee. Living in Houston, this aspect of my identity has become abundantly clear. I move through the world in distinctly non-Texan ways. I do not own cowboy boots, I cannot two-step, I don't own a car, and I root for neither the Houston Texans nor the Dallas Cowboys, though I'm happy to report that since we moved here, my son has become a fan of the Astros and the Rockets. And probably most disconcerting for many native Texans, I don't eat meat. Barbecue is not a part of my regular routine. Part of my recognition of my own Yankee nature has come from what I might describe as a general sense of disorientation as I wander through the Houston landscape. I grew up in Michigan, I studied in Illinois, Ohio, and Massachusetts. I'm used to different trees, different flowers, different rivers, but most importantly, I'm used to different mushrooms. You might not know this, but one of my great passions in life is foraging for mushrooms. Stick me in a northeastern forest for a few hours, sometime between the beginning of May and the end of October, and I'm liable to walk out with several pounds of edible mushrooms. Morels, black, gold, gray, chanterelles, flaming red, or colored like egg yolk, oysters, dryad saddles, gem-studded and giant puffballs, chicken of the woods, head of the woods, reishi. I know them all. In Texas, I find myself uncertain in my identification of the local mushroom species. There are mushrooms here that look deceptively similar to the ones that I can eat confidently back up north. They grow here in the Museum District and over in Herman Park. They have red caps and yellow stalks. They're plump, firm to the touch, solid all the way through, and have pores rather than gills on the underside. They look and smell exactly like bicolor boletes, a highly prized delicacy quite similar to porcinis. Imagine my delight when, shortly after I moved here, I found dozens of these mushrooms growing around the church. Of course, I picked a number and brought them back to my office with the intention of cooking them up that evening. Unfortunately, the mushrooms were not bicolor boletes. Now, this is not a tale of mushroom poisoning. There's a saying among foragers: there are old mushroom hunters, there are bold mushroom hunters, but there are no bold old mushroom hunters. And so I practiced an abundance of caution when it comes to mushrooms. When I got back to my office, I disappointingly noticed that the mushrooms were starting to stain blue. That's a bad sign. Bicolor boletes do not stain blue. I could not positively identify the mushrooms I was looking at. One guidebook indicated that they might be lurid boletes. Those are edible, a delicacy even, but unfortunately they grow only in Europe. Another suggested that they might be Boletus specius. Sadly, those are not found in the South. In another third, they appeared to be a variety of devil's boletes. And in mushroom I would not recommend you eating if you wanted to have a good evening. In the end, I decided that since I couldn't completely figure out what they were, I better not eat them. It was a disheartening experience. It made me feel disconnected, even alienated from the land. Normally, my knowledge of mushrooms helps me feel very connected to it. The experience is one that I've been ruminating on for the last couple of weeks as we've been exploring the theme of disruption in our worship service and the three crises of the hour. You might recall this year that in worship we're focusing on how we might develop religious and spiritual resources to help us in the work of confronting the climate crisis, the resurgence of white supremacy, and the assault on democracy. The roots of all three of these crises lie in a sense of disconnection or alienation. Many people in this country are alienated from the earth and alienated from each other. The climate crisis has been created because so many of us no longer understand that we are people of the earth. As the planet goes, so goes humanity. Poet Joy Harjo offers us wise counsel when she joins us too. Remember the earth whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. I had a taste of that alienation when I found myself unable to properly identify this local mushroom. For one of the reasons I love foraging is it makes me feel part of the earth whose skin I am. Sometimes my experiences in the north are a bit like this. I walk the woods and ramble the riverbanks looking for signs of mushrooms. It's midsummer. There's been a rain. Not yesterday, but the day before. It's supposed to be chanterelle season. Slow-growing, densely fleshed, chanterelles have a symbiotic relationship with oak trees. They entwine themselves with the roots and share nutrients, creating a network of enmeshed fungi and living wood that can stretch for acres. My eyes are scouring the leaf litter for signs of wrinkled yellow or red caps. Nothing. I walk for another hour, drifting towards that stand of ancient oak or towards the riverbank. Nothing. And then, at the edge of my vision, I see a hint of yellow. I look down and investigate, and there's a mushroom. I look up, and suddenly I see hundreds of the beautiful fruiting bodies. They range from tiny buttons to unfolding fractal caps the size of my fist. It's as if I've been invited into the network of mycelium and root mass that runs through the forest. In moments like those, I feel like I'm part of the earth, creation, the unnameable all of existence, which we might choose to call God or name the sacred and the divine. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them. Listen to them. They are alive. Homes. In the liberal theological tradition, of which Unitarian Universalism is one of the boldest expressions, God is understood to be the experience of connection to something greater than ourselves. The 19th century theologian, German theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher described this feeling as an experience of absolute dependence. This feeling of connection is at the root of what it means to be religious. The feeling of connection comes first. The words we use to describe it comes later. The feeling is universal. It comes from being embodied creatures traversing a world on which we are dependent. The words we use to describe this feeling are bound by the particularities of culture and tradition. Contemporary Schleiermacher scholar and Unitarian Universalist theologian Tendeka describes the dynamic this way. The first word that comes to mind to refer to this feeling of absolute dependence for Christians is God. For Buddhists, the first word might be sunyata. For pagans, Gaia. For humanists, the infinite, uncreated universe. The feeling is universal. The words are particular. And our society's alienation from this unnameable mystery is at the root of the climate crisis. We use words to describe the universal. Words can separate us from each other and our experience of connection. Human and earth. We can describe ourselves as something other than creatures of this planet. We can pretend it is possible to escape the consequences of our habits of burning fossil fuels, filling the oceans with plastic, and spoiling lands. We use words and begin to imagine this experience of connection to be an experience of disconnection, disembodiment. We use words and we get caught up in doctrinal differences. Theist versus humanist, Unitarian Christian versus pagan, Jew, Muslim, Mormon, Hindu, Buddhist. We use words and create cleavages between religious communities. The techno musician back home in Detroit, Nat Mike Banks, once described the dynamic this way. Categories and definitions separate, and with separation comes exploitation. In what remains of the sermon, I want to suggest a few strategies you might use to cultivate your sense of connection, move beyond words, and overcome alienation. Think of these as spiritual practices that might aid you in fostering a sense of connection during times of dislocation and crisis. I offer them with the insights from the German Jewish theologian Martin Buber. Buber was one of the 20th century's preeminent scholars of mysticism. He came to understand that humans develop our sense of identity in relationship to the other. I require you to become. Becoming I say you, are some of his most famous words. It's only through a connection with someone or something else that we come to know ourselves. Buber called this experience I-thou. I-thou is an experience of pure being. I-thou occurs when we cease to treat something or someone as a means to an end. We view them not for their utility or their use. Instead, we feel enveloped in the other, dependent, joined with, linked to them. Buber wrote, "He is no longer he or she or they, limited by he's and she's and they's, a dot in the world grid of space and time, nor a condition that can be experienced and described, a loose bundle of named qualities. In such moments, we experience other beings as seamless and discover that everything else lives in their light." Buber's language is difficult, poetic, dense, and hard to decipher. This is because language fails such experiences. They are experiences and not ideas, experiences and not words. Yet sometimes we find hints of such experiences in scriptures and sermons, poetry and luminous prose. One is evoked in Denise Libertad's masterful poem, "The Cat as Cat." Likewise, flecks and reflex of claws, gently pricking through sweater to skin, gently sustains their own tune, not mine. I, thou, cat. I, thou. I, thou, cat. I, thou. Are words that only conjure. And yet I ask you, have you ever had such moments of connection with another being? A pet, a family member, a lover, a friend, a complete stranger? For me, they open up when my cat lies on my lap and sings his cat song, when I get enthusiastic hugs from my children, when I sit beneath the foggy city stars and grasp for words to fill a conversation with a friend, when I dance and lose myself in the breaker circle or connect soul to soul with a tango partner, and when I sit at the salt water's edge and hear the backwash drag across the sand. Such moments of connection provide, in Buber's understanding, linkage to God, the grand mystery of the universe. Now, I recognize that God is a word that makes many Unitarian Universalists uncomfortable. Many of us like to label ourselves agnostics, atheists, and humanists and reject God. It's all words, and words divide and fail to describe the indescribable, the unnameable, that experience that I, and I suspect many of you as well, feel when we are connected to something greater than ourselves. Sometimes in my work as a minister, people will come to me and express hesitation about joining a Unitarian Universalist congregation. They do not believe in God, they will tell me, and therefore they think they cannot be part of a liberal religious community. I draw upon advice from the late Unitarian theologian Forrest Church and ask them, tell me about this God you do not believe in. Chances are I don't believe in that God either. We Unitarian Universalists often get caught up in what theologians call the via negativa. We love to talk about what God is not and express disbelief. God is not an old white man with a beard in the sky. God is not a vengeful deity angrily coming to smite those of us who have strayed from rigid doctrine. God is not a being that hates anyone who fails to fall into the too tidy box of heteronormativity. God is none of those things. What I'm suggesting this morning is that one of the religious practices we can go back to, root ourselves in times of crisis, is to pursue the via positiva. Here, Forest Church again offers us advice. God is not God's name, he told us. God is our name for the mystery that looms within and looms beyond the limits of our being. Life force, spirit, ground of being, these are two our names for the unnameable. God is present when we feel connected to and not separate from the blue-green ball of the planet and the great family of all souls of which we are each a part. Mark Buber suggested that there are three ways we might encounter this experience of pure being, which he was unafraid to call God. We can find it first through nature, second through other beings, people and animals, and third through art. I offered my experience as a mushroom hunter as an example of finding the sense of connection in nature. Such episodes are important. They remind us that we are dependent upon, not separate from, this planet, which is an ecological crisis. You might find them walking through the woods, strolling along a bayou, or rooting in the soil while you work in your garden. You might even simply find that experience by gazing at a tree, as Buber himself once did. Reflecting on what he felt while communing with the tree, he wrote, "Whatever belongs to the tree is included. Its form and its mechanics, its color and its chemistry, its conversation with the elements, and its conversation with the stars." We can also find the experience of connection with other beings, humans and animals. And here I could offer many examples rooted in wordless intimacies and ecstatic conversations. Holding a newborn baby, grasping the hand of a dying loved one, singing in community, sharing a well-crafted meal, silently coordinating together as we work to refurbish a house. The litany could continue endlessly, could continue as long as we could find new permutations of relationship. Buber, Denise Liebertoff, and I all apparently find such experience in our cats. Buber once wrote, "I sometimes look into the eyes of a house cat before launching into a long, eloquent passage on his theology of relation." And finally, there is what Buber called spiritual beings. Here he meant not angels or demons, but rather art and knowledge. These are things created by human beings that draw other human beings into the relation of my vow. To gain true knowledge and to understand another's knowledge, we need to be present entirely with what we are attempting to learn. We have to connect to it and let its patterns unfold for us. As an undergraduate, I earned a degree in physics. I remember a sense of awe and wonder that would come as I puzzled through line after line of confusing equations. Suddenly, sometimes the solution would appear, 5, 6, 7 lines in, an expression that represented the classical mechanics of pulleys or the way light bent as it traversed through lenses. It was like a flash of illumination that held up our relation to the ground of being, which there, in my physics books, I might call the laws of science. I've long since forsaken my scientific studies. These days, I'm much more likely to experience connection through art. You ever had the experience of being completely subsumed by a piece of art, where the work opened up a depth of emotion to you that blotted out everything around you? If you haven't, some afternoon following the service, I invite you to go down the block and visit the Museum of Fine Arts. Pick a piece, preferably in a quiet side gallery where you're not likely to be interrupted. I might suggest the Czech painter Franz Kupka's The Yellow Scale. It's found on the second floor of the Audrey Jones Beck building in the European painting section. Commit to spending 3 minutes looking at the piece. 1 minute from far away, 1 minute from somewhat closer, and then the last from as close as the guards will let you get. 3 minutes can be a long time to look at a piece of art, and at that time it might start to open itself to you. Kupka's The Yellow Scale appears to be a self-portrait. The artist reclines upon a wicker chair, one hand resting on a book, the other grasping a cigarette. He gazes straight out at you. He's awash in a sea of yellow. Only his flesh, hair, cigarette, and chair are other than yellow. The background is textured golden, the oil of the paint forming thin clots that give the painting depth. Kupka's robe is a brighter yellow, the fabric folding, reflecting, capturing light. Even his book and pillow are yellow. Each minute I move closer to the painting. I find myself more absorbed in its details. Soon there's only the painting and I and the painting, a moment of pure being, pure connection, the experience of being part of something larger than myself. Mushrooms, a tree, cat and human, knowledge and art, Buber claimed all actual life is encounter. As we seek religious tools to help us deal with the great disruptions of the hour, I suggest that we open ourselves up to these experiences of encounter. They can help us understand that we are neither separate from each other, nor separate from the earth. We are not alienated from our planet, or from the family of all souls. We are intricately bound together, and by opening ourselves to the I-Now, the experience of mystery, we find strength and reorientation for the struggles ahead. We can find that sense of connection within the walls of this sanctuary. I suspect that that's one reason why so many of us gather together Sunday after Sunday. Here, when we lift our voices together in song, sit together in wooden pews, or join together in meditation, we can encounter the feeling of connection to a community, the feeling of connection to something greater than ourselves, the great mystery of life. And in the last months, I found that I can have that experience and connection even here in the city of Houston. As I've walked through the streets of Montrose, I've seen it there. Purslane, a plant I know how to eat, pick, and prepare. Small, succulent weed, thick, juicy leaves, red, creeping stalk, medicinal, edible, a gentle reminder to me that even when I feel alienated, disconnected from the sweet earth, there is always the possibility of reconnection, of rerouting, of opening myself to the beauty and mystery that surrounds us at all times. So that such moments of connection, such gentle overcomings of alienation might be available to all of us, I invite the congregation to say, Amen. Amen.